have fun. No. At some point, I wonder if we should clarify the address.
Hello.
We will. I think a lot of
It's a long day, but we are almost at the end. And I'd like to thank you for joining us for this Retailer to Roaster panel with my 3 illustrious guests, who I think I should introduce, but firstly, maybe I should introduce myself because I forget that I am not Mariah Carey, and I possibly have to do that. Although much like Christina, I have a background in classical music too. I think opera singers just tend to believe that. Yes. So my name is Candice Madison. I am not from these parts. I don't know if you can tell. I am a London coffee professional who relocated to New York. I have been in coffee for about 10 years, and having had many previous careers, I found myself moving through all iterations of coffee professional life. So I've been a barista, a roaster, I am a Q grader, I am a Q instructor, and now find myself as the Director of Education at Irving Farm Coffee Roasters, who I'm really proud to represent today. I'm even prouder, thank you. I'm even prouder to introduce the panel for today's discussion. So we have...
Introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Right.
I mean, I could do it, but, you know.
My name is Angela Bryant. I own a coffee shop in Bellinger, Washington, of Washington State, called Primer Coffee.
And Angela is fascinating because how long have you been in coffee?
Well, not long. We opened our store end of the year 2016. I worked in coffee before that for about 7 years. And then long ago, I visited a coffee farm, which was actually where I got my first introduction to
I know, we want
coffee.
to hear more about that.
Yeah, a little bit of a backwards barista experience, but yeah.
Thanks, Angela. And then we have Christian.
Hi, I'm Christian Johnson. I'm the founder and owner of Spyhouse Coffee Roasters in Minneapolis, and I started in 2000. And we have 5 cafes, and we started roasting in 2013. We were a multi-roaster before that. Cafe Grumpy was one of our roasters that we had with Verve and Stumptown. And we have 52 employees. Kathy is somewhere who's on the Barista Guild Council. She is our director of wholesale relations and QC. And we brought tons of bags, and we don't want to take them back with us. So please take as many as possible.
The intro is a pleading. And lastly, we have Kyle.
My name is Kyle Bellinger. I am a partner at Neat Coffee in Fairfield County, Connecticut. My primary responsibilities are green buying and roasting. I've been at Neat now for 7.5 years.
I think what's really fascinating about all of you is that, unlike myself, coffee has been your lives. There weren't careers that I think you had before that. Kristen, I believe you went to college for journalism. Is that correct?
I went to the University of Minnesota, and I graduated in '98, and it was in journalism, urban studies, and photography. And 2 years after that, I opened Spyhouse. But before we opened, I had to go in front of the Planning Commission in Minneapolis. And my advisor for urban studies was she was the director, the head of the Planning Commission. And I had to go and speak in front of her. And it was terrifying. And I had this microphone stand, and I was at a podium, and it was the entire Planning Commission. And I had to talk about my project, what I wanted to do. This is for zoning, for really boring stuff, opening a cafe. And I was doing hand gestures, and I hit the mic, and it spun around in a circle. So I don't know what's better than this or the stand, because this keeps doing this.
Just don't throw it,
Yeah.
and I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question is, why? Why would you go from the ease of life of purchasing somebody's roasted, already packed already QC'd, already kind of like sorted, great, tasting notes, been proven coffees to roasting your own. What was the impetus for you, Angela? I think you started right from the beginning, didn't you?
Yeah. So again, backwards. I think I just do everything backwards. It's part of my life. So we started roasting coffee right away, and I wish I had started bringing in guest roasters much sooner than I did. But we knew when we started that we were the first of our kind in our town, and that it was going to be a challenge to sort of highlight what we wanted to and have it make any sense to the consumers in our area. So bringing in coffee from other roasters was a way for us to not only kind of create context for what we're doing, our customers could see another brand, and then they could Google it, and then they could learn about that company, and then they can kind of see like, oh, this is what specialty coffee is, and then maybe further appreciate what we're offering in the store. But also, as well as that, it helps, I think, our quality control and sort of remembering to drink coffee from everyone. I think it's important that my staff is able to consume other really great coffees as well. If you just drinking your own coffee all the time, you kind of lose sight of challenge.
Yeah, you can lose perspective.
Yes.
And think that your palate is the right palate.
Yeah.
So I can respect that.
Yeah. So being able to cup our coffees alongside other really great roasters, and like I said, there wasn't at the time any in our town. So it's not like even my staff could go down the road and get something different to drink. So yeah, that's sort of the why, opposite why for me.
And Kyle, I know that we're in quite illustrious company in the sense that you were the 2016 first runner-up for the US Roasting Championships, which is a pretty mean feat, me previously being a roaster knowing that's pretty hardcore.
It's worth noting, though, that I was a runner-up to Spyhouse.
I was just about to say. Well done, Spyhouse. I know that you owning this farm in Wheeler in Colombia is where your heart is in terms of Colombian being the origin. Did you always know at Neat that you were going to start roasting your own coffee, and did you have that kind of connection in mind?
No. When Neat opened, it was a multi-roaster shop. And after probably 3 or 4 years, we decided, you know what, like we really want to do this ourselves. We've tasted, every roaster out there, not every, but a large number of roasters, and we're like, I think we can do this. I think there's a way that we can do this ourselves. And so we kind of took the plunge in 2013. As far as the whole Colombia connection, that came later. Being that we started roasting our own coffee, I wanted to start traveling and visiting farmers, and I happened to know an exporter in Colombia, and so I was like, oh, can I go to Colombia with you? Can you introduce me to people? And he said no, a lot, but I didn't really get it, so I kept kind of pressing him, and eventually he was like, okay, meet me there. And so I met him there, and I started working with a single farmer, and then about 6 months later, he emailed me and said, hey, do you want to be a partner with me in this farm? And I was like, no, that'd be crazy, right? But then about 6 months later, I bought the farms.
Not literally, which is great. So I know that when I worked for a roaster, it wasn't a multi-roaster. I still call this man my boss because he's one of my very best friends, and he'll always be the boss in his mind. But we worked with a great roaster in London, and for us, there wasn't the plethora of roasters out there. And we felt that after a while that was something that naturally felt viable. But because our palates were developed, because we had the experience of working with a roaster. But I know that, let's be honest, finances are very, very attractive, or very much more attractive in a lot of senses if you're roasting your own coffee. That being said, there are tons of pitfalls. So was it daunting to approach roasting and not just think about like, oh, I'm just going to roast my own coffee and it's going to taste it, it's going to taste fabulous? There's a lot more behind that. Christian, how was that for you in approaching it?
I think, so one of our waves of the multi-roasters was Ritual, Verve, and Kova. And Keith, a co-founder of Kova, who owns Able Brewing and States Coffee in Martinez, we became pretty good friends because of the Kova relationship. And, he's since, sold his half of Kova years ago. And he became a mentor for us on finding the roaster, the UG22, and to finding the person to restore it, which happened to be his wife's uncle, Steve Pardini, in California, and who has refurbished, a lot of people's roasters. And he helped us find Tony, our director of coffee, who's our head roaster, and who I co-green by with and travel with. And we just got back from Colombia about 4 days ago. So it's like 8 plane flights in the last week. So Keith really helped out a lot, and also helping us get to attain certain relationships with exporters. Onyx Coffee on our Guats back then. Cafe Imports is in Minneapolis, and it's only about a half mile down from our roastery in northeast Minneapolis. And Cafe Imports has been extremely, awesome and generous, and a really good resource for us, and we travel with them a lot. And that's kind of where it started. And I think being in retail for so long, for me to start roasting was to get away from just the retail grind, because I had done it for 12 years. So I really wanted to delve into a broader expanse of coffee, which is that.
So, Angela, I know there are a lot of challenges when you start to think about roasting your own coffee, and this is for all of you, like, what was the most surprising challenge that you kind of didn't think about? Because I know you had construction issues, which maybe wouldn't have been the first thought on your mind.
Yeah, that was tough. I think that was less tough for the roasting side. We work with a co-op, so the roasting space was already set up. But our cafe itself, we were, I would say 11 months out from our original open date as far as just construction, and we certainly did not plan on that. That was tough for, I think the toughest part with that was that we had hired a lot of people, and we had figured out who was going to roast our coffee and knew how to roast coffee. And, flying that person in and they're trying to build a home, and we're trying to employ them, but we're not selling any coffee yet because our store wasn't open. That was probably the hardest in the beginning for us.
And for you, Kyle, did you think it, I don't think anyone thinks it's going to be wine and roses when they start a new huge project that has so many moving parts, but...
For us, the goal wasn't really to build a wholesale business. We were one store, and we were fortunate enough still are fortunate to roast out of the Pulley Collective in Brooklyn. And so we didn't have to front the money for a roaster, so we didn't have to get the money back on that. And so for us, it was a really low barrier to entry, and I didn't feel the need to okay, I gotta make money. It was it gave me time and room to kind of play around and figure out how we want to do things. So I really didn't feel a whole lot of pressure from the beginning to make it all work perfectly.
I think that's one of the benefits about these new collectives that are arising. I know there's Bureau in Australia and Pulley here, and I think there's something going on in London, but I have to confess that I'm not completely sure. But I think that that's one way in which, exactly what you said, the barriers are so much lower than they used to be, because buying a roaster is buying a car. So I used to roast on a Probat to start, an L12, and then I moved on to a full convection roaster from Loring called the A15, which I don't believe they make anymore. It's a custom roaster. But it's the only roaster I would roast on. When they found out that I had roasted for a WBC finalist, they agreed to build me one should I choose to go back into roasting again. So I had that thought in the back of my head. So for me, it's easy to think about if I wanted to start roasting for myself, what roaster I would use. But Kristen, you have this UG22, which is a fabulous model. I mean, it stands the test of time. It's the roaster that they refurbed at Square Mile, and Jess McDonald was roasting on there. But how did you choose?
For me, well, I come from a barista background, so I am not a roaster personally, and it was just a lot of dialogue with Keith, and also the relationships we had with our other roasters, which a lot of them worked on Probats, and Keith kind of pushed for getting a new one because of what it takes to get one refurbished. It takes a long time. 9 months, 9 to 12 months, and to find someone. I don't even think Steve does it anymore, and it's expensive. But I really wanted something that had character, that was, I've really been into antiques. I do all the interior design at all the stores, and it was one of my first jobs. I mean, I've never had like an office job. I've just worked in cafes and restaurants, but in college I worked at an antique store, and that's kind of where it started. And I just really love all of the history and the character and the mystery and the, energy that comes from antiques, and to just restore and refurbish something that already exists, even if it was in a field in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So that was kind of our choice for doing that.
Angela, I'm forgotten what model of roaster you work on.
We have a Diedrich. It's a 12 kilo.
Which is a very different method of roasting. How did you?
Well, like I said, we didn't actually pick it because there's a co-op that we use. So that's what they have, and they just have the one, and there's.
They just have the one roaster.
They just have the one, yeah. We're a small town, like I said. So there's, I think, maybe 6 or 7 other companies that use that space. But yeah, it's really a small operation, small warehouse. So.
And so do you talk to, how collaborative? I know that when I was roasting in London, when we started, we got a lot of help from our wholesaler, James Hoffman, who worked a lot with the person that I was working for, and kind of walked him through a lot of things. Roasting classes weren't available. You learned how to roast like I did by begging to intern and then working for peanuts and, sweeping things up. Like now there are, I think, a lot more resources for people who want to start roasting for themselves. But how did you make that move from knowing nothing about roasting to knowing how to roast, or even who to employ to do that for you?
That's a great question. I think with many things that I do with the business, it's really been all about finding the right people. So I found someone who was living in Nashville at the time, and he had worked in coffee for a while. But I think more than the knowledge that he already had, I knew that he had the time and just like a lot of eagerness to learn. And I think he's done a few different classes, I believe, but more than that, it's just it's like a constant need for him to be a sponge and to be soaking in everything that he's learning from everyone that he possibly can. So I guess in a way, I might say that it was almost, a blessing is a stretch, but that we took so long to open because that was time that he was just putting in roasting and learning and engaging with the product.
So the silver lining to the craziness. There's a question. It's anonymous, which I love. No, I would be more anonymous if I could. So the question is, do you have a strategy for interdisciplinary training for your staff? such as coffee prep training for roasters, cupping training for roasters and baristas. I do want to continue with your thoughts, Kyle and Christian, on how you approached becoming a roaster from becoming a retailer in terms of understanding and learning, but also what do you provide for your staff with that in mind also?
Well, we do cuppings for the staff. When we hire, we definitely hire from within. So if there's a production position available or an assistant roaster / production assistant position available, we'll put out that call internally. In relation to roasting for baristas, I guess if somebody was interested to go through from beginning to end, dumping it into dropping, that would be a question for Tony. But I would guess that we would let baristas do that. But we haven't had. I mean, there's been a few baristas that have been interested in roasting, but no one that has kind of sat through a whole roast cycle. Stuff. I guess I don't understand. I mean, I understand the question, but beyond roasting, cupping, what other areas are they referring to? Do you think?
I mean, for me, and Kyle can pick this up as well. Like for me, learning the very basic fundamentals, just learning what coffee is, learning that it was a fruit, learning how it would behave, understanding staling, understanding. I think more of the foundational skills that people may not
Through
consider.
Training. Yeah. Oh, totally through barista training. All of that. Yeah. From seed to cup.
Yeah.
All the way through that. Equipment. Yeah. What is coffee? A lot of that, and a lot of that is due to Kathy, who wrote the whole training manual for Spyhouse.
Right.
She did a great job, and it's very comprehensive. So yeah, we go through everything on the history of coffee, on all things coffee. We have, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, we built out a lab, green storage, and a training center and cupping room below the roastery. And that's, we have a whole resource library of pretty much everything. And we obviously, like everybody else, subscribes to, Coffee and Cocoa International, Roast, Fresh Cup, Barista, the main trade magazines. And we try to encourage our staff to get on newsletters for daily coffee news, which, sometimes even for me is like daunting. I get nervous when those emails keep coming in because I try to keep up with all the reading, but so that's what we do.
Kyle, who taught you to roast? Do you roast?
Yeah,
do you have a roaster?
Up until about 1.5 years ago, I had roasted literally every single bean that had been served by us under our brand. About 1.5 years ago, I hired our first assistant, and but I guess to answer your original question about how did I learn to roast, when we decided that we wanted to go down that path of roasting our own coffee, we actually reached out to Tim Wendelbo in Oslo, Norway. And he was more than happy to host us for training. And I can honestly say now, 6 years out from that was probably the best decision we've ever made as a roasting company.
I think that's, I would share that was a good decision since Tim is probably one of my favorite coffee roasters in the world. I think that the journey to roasting is quite circuitous for some and quite direct for others. For me, it just involved a trip around Scandinavia, and that sounds very glamorous and exciting, but London is really close to Scandinavia, so not so exciting. But it was wonderful in terms of the embracing of the coffee community, and that sharing of knowledge is something that I always want to pass on to other people. So we were talking in the previous session about emotional labor. Roasting is very intimate. You said you roasted every single bean until 1.5 years ago, and then you had an assistant. And I remember having the first assistant and being sort of like, will it taste as good? Will you know as much? Will I be able to teach you? And then making sure that they felt confident, comfortable, and supported. Do you have, and this is like not a gotcha question, but kind of like is it something that you have in place in terms of training and education? Obviously, that's where my focus is now on emotionally supporting people through what can be really daunting. Do you have a way or a plan or a culture in your companies that supports people through this training that you may give them? Or like, what if your roasting assistant ran up to you and said, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm freaking out, I don't know what's going on with the roaster, like, what the hell? Like, and you know that you have orders to fill in the next day.
I mean, I know for us, we're still small. I mean, it's just me and one other person right now, and I knew that when I hired him that I was going to have to give up some control. Like I have some perfectionist tendencies. Maybe that's a product of having trained with Tim.
I don't know a roaster who does not have that. Sorry.
And so I knew, like, all right, I knew that this is the best thing for the business. I have to hire this person, and I have to kind of let them figure it out. And so for both, for my assistant, and we have a pretty open relationship, and I've kind of let him own some things. And I think that has built trust both ways. At the end of the day, he knows that, what I say goes, but I've also given him like a pretty long leash, and like, his opinion absolutely matters when we cup coffees together. And there have been times when I've been like, you know what, I think you're right. I think we should do this or this. And so, I think really building trust, but still like kind of bringing structure is absolutely important.
Yeah, I think definitely that is, for me, one of the two parts of the foundations for being a roaster, because also you're going to fail. Roasting is that really fun thing like baking croissants. Have you ever tried to bake croissants or macaroons and you go into the oven and you open them up and they're just flat little discs of nothingness? And you're like, I did everything they told me. Were you prepared for, because I mean, let's be real, no one wakes up in the morning and knows how to roast coffee. So were you prepared for the amount of time that it took to get it right? Because you mentioned Tim Wendelboe. I know he's just switched over from one roaster and brand to another larger roaster and different brand, and they spent months just learning how to roast on a new roaster. Were you prepared for how long it would take? To anyone? Everyone? All of you? No one in particular? Anyone in the audience?
I'll say that I don't think I really knew enough when I started to really know what to expect. And when we started, it was like a slow transition. Like I just started roasting our espresso and our cold brew, and then we kind of overhauled our entire menu. And in retrospect, our coffee didn't taste good for like a year and a half. At the time, I thought it tasted good, but then you realize, oh, maybe it didn't taste that good. So I guess I didn't know what to expect. I didn't really know what my expectations should be from day one. But like I said, I was in a really fortunate position of not feeling super pressured, and so I had time and room to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, I think with, and I'm speaking for, because I was part of that process, but I'm speaking for, Tony and Keith. I think we, all of us have been in coffee for quite some time, but one thing that's definitely different when you start roasting is that you cup a lot more.
Absolutely.
And
amen to that.
And the only way that you can get, better at cupping is to cup all the time. It starts from beginner to learning to mastery to teaching. And teaching is, like Q graders, teaching SCA classes. And and Tony is, man, he, sometimes I kind of, make the joke with other administrative people around. If Tony's talking, I'll be like, can you take the professor in the back and plug him into hyperdrive? Because he's super devoted and super logistical and smart and is very committed to figuring it out. And him and Keith kind of form this interesting relationship through that process. Of Keith getting us up to the level of the roasters that we had before, which were, some of the best in the industry, And so, yeah, we had, there was, times where the coffee didn't taste great, or, there wasn't balance between, acidity and body, and you kind of figure out, but you just got to cup like crazy all the time, as much as possible.
Absolutely. Do you agree with that, Angela? I see you shaking your head like, yes.
Yeah, that's good. I hesitate to answer this question because, like I said, we're so new. It almost feels like we don't know what we're doing. We're still trying to, develop that, and we'll constantly be doing that.
I'll tell you a secret.
Nobody knows
what they're doing.
Exactly.
It's a fallacy in the industry. I hear people write books, and that's great, and people give lectures, and that's wonderful, and people teach, and that's fabulous.
Yeah.
But very few people would admit that they don't know what the hell they're doing, and sometimes it just works.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But I would speak to the I guess the control element. I don't do the roasting myself. But I do think that across the board with my business it's important for me to kind of hold everything with an open hand. And it's scary for sure, but as long as I'm hiring people who I really believe will do better than me, even if they're not there yet, providing them those opportunities to fail and giving up that control, I think ultimately will be for the best, I guess.
I think so. And it leads on to the next question. So, and this is something that we thought about moving from such an established roaster when I was roasting for Square Mile to roasting our own coffee. We have a question here that says, how did starting to roast affect your brand perception by regular baristas? So I think it's a little different for you. In a smaller town, maybe the exposure wasn't, not regular baristas, regular guests. So the exposure maybe to other roasters wasn't so huge that the brand sort of changed identity so much. But for all of you, like, how did that roasting your own coffee kind of translate to your guests, and what messaging was in place in order for you to maintain the trust? Because that's really what it is.
Well, I think for us, especially, there's different, I wouldn't say, I don't know if they'd be trends. I don't want to say waves, because waves of coffee, but through the last 10 years there's been, and I think that's still true now, where people really want things that are, even though we're not growing the coffee, we're roasting the coffee, and we're a local business, and it's produced locally, and the local thing has even gotten, for me, for Minneapolis anyway, it kind of started maybe right when we started roasting or opened that Northeast Cafe, the third cafe. So that'd have been, 2012, 2013-ish. And so it kind of all fell together. And when we started roasting, we sold way more retail bags than when we were a multi-roaster.
Really?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. And, and I think any other, coffee company that's roasting, that came from the multi-roaster model, can probably say the same thing. It was tenfold.
Wow.
Yeah, by
That's
far.
Incredible.
Yeah. And I just think it's just because, it's a local brand. We're pretty spread out in certain areas of the city that are pretty indicative of Minneapolis as a whole, even though each neighborhood is very different. And so I think that, and we've been around a long time.
Yeah, and you visit all 4 or 5 of your cafes every day, isn't that correct?
Not every, it's weird. I mean, I remember this a few years ago. I was talking to, I asked Ryan this from Verve. I'm like, do you feel weird if you haven't been to one of your cafes in a day or two? And he's like, yeah, I think it's weird for owners to because I started this to be involved in a project, and it's never been about money. And David Axelrod, Obama's campaign manager, said to John Favreau of Pod Save America, he said, there's two kinds of people. There's people that want to do something and people that want to be something. And for me, and I think it's for most people in coffee, especially specialty coffee and indie coffee, is that we do it to be a part of something, and it has nothing to do with the money. So then it gets confusing to me because I want to learn as much as possible about coffee, with World Coffee Research and fermentation and environmental conditions and women in coffee and all this stuff. With the exception of providing for these producers, what is the benefit, and I don't know the answer, what is the benefit for us that primarily roast for ourselves to grow our wholesale just for money?
But is it only for money? And this is something I was going to ask. And Kyle, I'm sorry if you wanted to jump in there.
I don't know if that makes
sense.
I'm just confusing.
Yeah.
I might be confused.
We're talking about sort of the perception for your regular guests and the brand identity and how you manage that.
Yeah, when we made that transition, I mean, we had been open for 4 years, I guess. Yeah. I don't think our regular customers noticed.
Wow.
If I'm entirely honest, I really don't think they did. I think
that's probably the greatest compliment.
What roasters did we use?
Just
everybody. Primarily, we were using George Howell and Hart when we made the decision to switch. But I think, if anything, the switch was noticed by people in the industry, because we were known for being, one of the first specialty coffee shops in Connecticut. So people knew that we had good coffee. But then when people found out, that shop in Connecticut, they're now roasting their own coffee, I think that was more noticed by industry people, not by our regular customers.
That's a comfortable place to be in, because it can be really scary to go from, especially well-known, well-established brands who have a very strong roast profile identity and a strong presence in the industry. It can be interesting and intriguing to customers, but managed badly, it can almost be detrimental to business, at least for a while. And it's amazing to hear that that wasn't something that your customers really noticed.
Frankly, I wish they had been more excited about the switch, but honestly, I really don't think many of them noticed.
I think when it was really noticed with our coffee is when we, because we started in 2000, we weren't doing exceptional coffee until 2009. So when we switched from super over-roasted, oily, fishy smelling, bad,
You mean they found that elusive third crack?
Premium below 80-point coffee, and then the world of specialty coffee, when it opened my eyes, it was like, oh my God, all this stuff is out there, all these amazing roasters are out there, and then it just goes from, equipment to bottomless portafilters and to tampers and all this stuff. When we switched, we lost a certain segment of customers. It was small, but it was a very specific type of customer that we lost. Older white guys that wanted free coffee.
I was about to say the New York bodega coffee crowd. I understand, right?
Yeah, so not to offend the older white, newspaper reading, grandpas.
I'm okay, I don't feel offended at all, thanks. I'm good.
But yeah, they're, and then, getting, rid of refills, the refill for $1 thing back then, and we had to fight through a lot of different levels of stuff.
And Angela, I think that you're in the best of both worlds in the sense that you're still carrying, and you're a multi-roaster who roasts their own. So I think you spoke when we briefly chatted about the fact that it kind of elevated your own brand in a sense, but it also, because you're in a smaller town, gives people the opportunity to have a democratic kind of experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's still, I don't know, makes me feel all warm and bubbly inside when I think about our coffee standing up next to these other roasters that we've been featuring. So yeah, I think we definitely sell more of our own roast, and I think that's for the same reasons that he was talking, just in that everyone really likes the local vibe. Yeah.
Let's see, making sure I have all these questions. One of the things that I wanted to ask, as I have one of my own and another one, but my question is, there is this terrible phrase that keeps going around called SJW, the social justice warrior, which to me is a terrible phrase because surely we all want some form of justice for everybody.
What was it?
The SJW, social justice warrior. It's meant to be an insult in the sense that you're, championing other causes. But coffee, and especially specialty coffee, is championing other causes. It is being aware of your supply chain. It is wanting a degree, at least from the community that I've been involved with, wanting that degree of transparency, sustainability, the impact that you have on your coffee buying or your roasting practices and who you buy your green for if you don't buy it yourself. That impact is felt and reverberates all the way through the supply chain to the origins that you buy from. Do you have a particular ethos if you buy your own coffee or who you're buying from, and think about sort of that ethos is it about the way you impact, either positively or trying not to impact negatively? Do you have that for your companies? Do you have a way that you buy green coffee and a philosophy about that? Or is it just about sort of taste and relying on your your importer or your green buyer to have made certain decisions and you concentrate on the origins you want to buy from, the tastes and flavor profiles you want to have?
You want to go or? Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, I think for me personally, obviously cup clarity and clean cup and quality of the cup, all of that is important. But I think, and I don't want this to sound cheesy or cliche, but when we were in Colombia, and we're not buying from this producer yet, I would like to get samples from him, but Quinones family in Pitalito, Colombia, that farm was up high. It was almost 2,000 meters, and the story for this guy is, this is what I like. I mean, the first day that the first Spyhouse opened in 2000 in the summer, I had $7 left. Like, that was it. I had SBA loan. I had I think $5,000 from my family, and that was about it. This farmer, he's 37, and it's him and his brother, and they both have their own lots. He picked coffee for 8 years and saved up money and then purchased this farm. It's one of the most beautiful views I've ever seen on a coffee farm. And it just blew my mind. And that's who we would like to buy coffee from. It's not always the case where it's that super small and you're buying, 5, 10, 20 bags a year from them. Otilio Leyva in Santa Barbara in Honduras, this will be, I think, the 4th or 5th year that we're buying coffee from him. He's got 30 kids, or what is it? He's got 20, how many kids does he have? I think it's 10 kids and 30 grandchildren. And when we visited this farm, all of the kids do the picking and they all work on the farm. And his wife has a farm, and there's another coffee company that buys his wife's coffee. And, but then on the flip side, there's a mill, Chilbesa in Ethiopia, where there's 1,000 producers bringing their coffee in. But I really like the small farmer thing because it's just true entrepreneurship. I mean, it's no different than her or me or you. It's small business, and that's what. And
that connection, that direct connection and relationship is important to you. I know it's really important for us at Irving Farm, and it's important to me in general. Like, I like to know where my food comes from, in the same way I like to know where my coffee comes from. And much as I want to support local cuisine and local markets and, you know, local growers and buyers of my food, that's the same way I feel about the coffee that I drink. Angela, do you source your own green coffee? Do you work with an importer?
Yeah, the guy who does our roasting does most of it, but we work pretty closely with Onyx. They're in town, in the same town as us, so they really do a lot for us. They're really generous and great. But I will say I am challenged by your question, and you know, I'm coming at things often from a very busy in our little cafe setting and trying to create an offerings list that has this and this, and I want to highlight process, and I want to highlight story, and I want to have really great cups of coffee, and so it's good. It's good. Thank you. Like for
You're welcome. It is a challenging thought to have. I'm going to take one more question from here, and then I want to open it up to the floor so everyone gets a chance to speak to these delightful people. Do you think being a multi-roaster, Angela, in terms of the fact that you roast your own coffee and serve other coffee, gives you an advantage over people who are just roasting their own coffee? Sorry, guys.
That's interesting. An advantage. I don't know if I would say it gives me an advantage. I think for where I'm at, it certainly does. Like I said earlier, providing context for what we're doing. Can you ask me one more time?
Yeah. Do you think being a multi-roaster gives you an advantage over people with roasteries or start roasting and only carry their own coffee?
Okay. Well, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of a disadvantage because I don't make as much money off of selling other people's coffee. But I think that in the end, it's definitely for me more worth it to provide that context and to challenge not only my staff but my customers to be engaging and drinking good coffee and trying different things and learning more. And
Awesome, thanks. So my lovely peeps in the audience, thanks for listening to us chat, but now we want to hear from you. Does anyone have any questions? Great. Jamie? Oh, there's a mic coming for you because we all want to hear what you have to say.
It's okay, I can be loud. You're all owners of your businesses, and you spoke to this a little bit with the last question, but how do you balance the specific knowledge that it takes to do each of the individualized duties of a roaster retailer from seed to cup, with the fact that you have to have an overarching vision for your company?
So, I mean, everybody wants to think that owning a roastery is just roasting coffee, but it's not. There's sales, there is green buying, there is managing and administration, there's the really scary spreadsheet part, which I don't like to look at all. Is that right, Jamie? It's just all the different facets of what it means to be a roaster.
General vision for the company. Like, how do you manage your time?
Oh, shit. So,
Do you sleep is basically the shorthand TLDR for that.
so I calculated this. I did this 6 months ago, but I did it again for you guys. So it's, and I'm not kidding, like Kathy knows this, but and I'm not saying I'm above any other workers or anything, but I've worked about 6,500 plus days in a row straight. And there's it's weird for me and Spyhouse, it's like one and the same thing. So when we go to Columbia, for a lot of these importers that we go with, it's like, they have fun too, but it's work for them. For us, I guess I don't know about Tony, but for me, it's fun and work, and it's all the same thing. So how our company is broken down is, there's so many titles we could give ourselves, but it's, director of operations. So it's me and the director of retail, and she is co-director of operations. And me and her oversee roasting, wholesale, education, QC, pretty much everything. So she's in charge of mainly the retail cafes and all the managers. And then Tony and I, co-green mine, we travel together. Kathy and her assistant, Alex, they do wholesale relations and education and QC. And the accounting stuff I've always done. I don't do quarterly and year-end stuff. Our accountant does that. But the day-to-day accounting and inventory, we do all of that. Tony also does green inventory. We do it together. It's 2 separate programs. And that's what's weird for a small company, is that we're not big enough, and I'd like to talk to Cheryl about this later, about operational stuff, but we are still using, obviously Square, Excel, Cropster, QuickBooks. There's too many programs. Like, we are getting to the level where we need one overarching program for everything, because sometimes it gets confusing, but I've been doing this for so long that I'm just kind of used to it, and I like the numbers. When it comes to the cafes, because I did it for too long, I try and stay out of, the micromanaging, even though, oh my God, baristas. So the light bulb stuff.
Controversial.
If there's certain things in the cafes, like changing out light bulbs. That's what I mean. That's the one that really gets to me. But it's, we have, a great staff from the top all the way down to the bottom, and everything is delegated out. Everybody tries to stay on the same page. If there's issues with training, we try and deal with it accordingly, and we try and give our knowledge to the baristas, because they're literally boots on the ground and the face of the company most of the time. And, we just have to have faith in them that they'll, do that to their best abilities on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks. Burning questions? No burning questions about roasting? Usually I'm held hostage by people. I have a burning question, and it's something that I speak to friends about all the time, and it is a very short question, and it usually elicits a lot of mulling. Do you regret it? Do you regret going into this side of the business? Angela looks at me in disbelief, like, no.
I'm so new to it. Of course I'm going to say no.
Kyle?
I certainly don't regret it. That said, for people who are entering this business, I do give a word of warning. It's not, no one's like getting super rich.
Yeah.
No one is, it's, I've been in the industry for 10 years and it's still a battle every single day. So you have to love it. You have to really, really love it. And I do, which is great. So I don't regret anything, but it's not the easiest industry to really carve out a career.
It's really not. And I think that one of the things that when I have newbie roasters or wannabe roasters or people who have these big, huge Disney eyes with sparkles in them, like, I want to be a roaster. And I look at them and I say, you know what's great about roasting? You go in at the crack of dawn. You have really good time for one day playing on the sample roaster and getting that right. You have a great, fun, really frustrating wanting to sit in a jacuzzi with ice cream and beer, which was how I spent one of the most frustrating days or evenings of roasting, trying to get the profile right. And then it's food production. And then it's merely roasting the same coffee and packing it and labeling it and boxing it and shipping it and doing it again. And can you hear the monotony? It is not that much fun, and my back hurts still. So that's kind of my word to people. It's like, you have to love this, because this is not as much fun as it looks from the outside. It is hard work. And that's my word of advice to new roasters. That and the finances and understanding your profit margins on buying green and understanding that they can go really wrong as well as it can go really right, because who here as a roaster has never had a roaster fire? Oh no, I'm lying. That's not true. And I don't believe you, and I don't believe you. No, I'm kidding. So I think that for me, it's about really wanting to encourage people, but also making them understand that it's not, it's not wine and roses and glamorous shots on the front of Barista magazine. Well, we all want to get there. So if there aren't any more questions from our very silent but lovely audience, I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming. And I'd like to thank you. But I'd like to thank you for coming and talking about something that's so close to your heart and something you are passionate about and something that you're giving us as a community, which is, I'm always grateful when people bake me cakes and make me coffee. So thanks.
Happy birthday. And it's her birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thanks all. Thanks, Christian. And thanks.